Peaceable and faithful amidst division and strife. 2 Samuel 20 verse 19. I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. These are words of the wise woman in Abel, that she spoke to Joab on occasion of his besieging that city. It had been a time of very great contention and confusion in Israel, in which the nation in general were embroiled. They were divided into 2 parties, one for David and the other for his rebellious son Absalom. The nation in this quarrel had been put into a dreadful tumult, and many sad things had been done very unbecoming of visible people of God, especially that people that God had chosen for his peculiar people, above all the families in the earth. The main body of the people foolishly hearkened to Absalom, and fell in with him, who craftily wound himself into people's affections by appearing friend to them that looked upon themselves wronged by the king. He said to them, See, thy matters are right and good, and yet there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. And said moreover, O that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. And when any man came nigh to him, he put forth his hand, and took him, and kissed him. And by this means he gained the main body of the people so far, that they rose up in open opposition to David, though still a part of the people cleaved to David. David himself carried it with an excellent spirit, but Joab, that was a chief manager for him, though he was of the right side, carried things in many respects in a very unwarrantable, fierce and furious manner, so that the nation in general, that were divided into these parties, were all in confusion, and many very ill things had been done on both sides, greatly to Israel's reproach. That party in Israel that was against David listed themselves under Absalom while he lived, and after he was dead followed Sheba, the son of Bichri, and his party, it seemed, grew less and less, so that being pursued by Joab, he betakes himself to a fenced city, Abel of Beth-maachah, where he shuts himself up. But Joab comes with his army and closely besieges the city, and probably reduces it to great distress. Then comes this wise woman, some of whose words I have chosen for my text, and cries to Joab's army out of the city. Hear, hear, says she. Say, I pray you unto Joab, Come near hither, that I may speak with thee. Upon which Joab came near. The woman says to him, Art thou Joab? And he answered, I am he. Then she said to him, as we have accounted the 17th, 18th, and 19th verses, Hear the words of thine handmaid. And he answered, I do hear. Then she spake, saying, They were wont to speak in old times, saying, They shall surely ask counsel at Abel. And so they ended the matter. I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? In the words of the text we may observe 2 things. 1, we may observe the character of a certain number in Israel that she speaks of, and that consists in 2 things. 1, that they were peaceable in Israel in the midst of all this strife and tumult. They were quiet and made no disturbance. They were calm in their spirits, and wisely avoiding intermeddling in contention. They did not put their hands into the fire. When the nation was in a rage, they were meek and mild in spirit and practice. There were a number of peaceable-spirited persons that lamented the unhappy breaches and divisions of Israel, and carried it as their burden, as this wise woman evidently did. She had a great sense in her spirit, how that the inheritance of the Lord in all this contention suffered, and was almost swallowed up, as in the latter part of the verse of the text, Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? 2. They were faithful in Israel. They were faithful to God, and did not, for the sake of their temporal interests, dishonour the name of God, and stir up public contention, and so bring public misery. But they cleaved faithfully to God, while the multitude seemed to have forgot themselves and their allegiance to God. And they were also faithful to their rightful sovereign, King David, when Israel in general, except in the tribe of Judah, rose up in a wicked rebellion against David, the Lord's anointed, siding with Absalom. She never countenanced such a rebellion, though she was not one of the tribe of Judah, but one of the other tribes. 2. We may observe in the words that she ranks herself among those she professes, and claims this character that she was one of those that were thus peaceable and faithful in Israel. Though the people of the tribe that she was of, and the city that she dwelt in, generally were hot and engaged in Absalom's, and afterwards on Sheba's side, yet she never joined with them. She never countenanced their factious, tumultuous practices. And though she was a good and faithful subject of King David, yet she showed no spirit or fierceness of mind, but while all were in a tumult about, she was quiet. In this time of trouble and contention she chose to wait on God, though she was apposite in her judgment to the men of her city, yet she never appeared fierce or violent, otherwise she would never have been trusted by the men of the city. She was one that was sensible of the sad effects of strife and heartily lamented them, as appears by her words. Though she was of the same side that Joab was, yet she did not justify, but condemned his fierceness and violent spirit. Doctrine. When a spirit of strife has been prevailing amongst a visible people of God, and they have been divided into parties, 'tis that which a person may well greatly rejoice in, if he can say that he is one that has been peaceable and faithful among them. This is a character that the wise woman in the text justly claims. She was one that was peaceable and faithful in Israel, in the time of those great divisions and strifes that had been in Israel. She mentions it as a thing she rejoices in, and claims it as a just honour due to her that she be regarded as such an one, and mentions to Joab as what might justly give weight with him to what she had to say. I would handle this point first by inquiring when a person may justly say this to themselves. Second, why, when they can, they may well rejoice in it. 1. I would inquire when a person in time of strife and division amongst the people can justly say that he is one that is peaceable and faithful. First, negatively in several things. 1. Not everyone that is on the right side can claim this character. We are speaking now of a case wherein there is, or has been, a division of people into different parties. When it is thus, sometimes the case is so that neither side can properly be said to be on the right side. Both may be in the wrong. Each may be led by wrong principles, and what each contends for may not be just. 2 parties may contend for that which belongs to neither, and when the ground of contention is a mere trifle, a matter of no manner of consequence, not worthy at all to be insisted on, as sometimes it may be, neither can be said to be of a right side. But sometimes 'tis so in case of strife, that the cause of one party in the main is much more just than the other. Their right is chiefly invaded, and they are principally injured. But when the case is thus, and a man is of the right side, or of that party whose cause is in the main just, yet there is not sufficient to denominate him one that is peaceable and faithful in Israel, though he may be right in his judgment, and the party he opposes wrong, and though he be of that party that is chiefly injured, and the party that he opposed much the most injurious, he may, notwithstanding this, be exceeding far from the character of the wise woman of Abel. He may be a very contentious person, and carry himself very contentiously, and be the blamable cause of a great deal of that strife that is carried on. Joab was one that was of the right side in the time of the great contention in Israel, when the nation was divided into 2 parties between David and Absalom. He was of David's side, which was the right side. They were on the right side of the cause. Yet he showed a very fierce and violent spirit in the management of this quarrel. The wise woman of Abel don't justify him, but greatly condemns him, though she was of the same side that he was, for she was a faithful subject of King David. Yet she condemns his fierce and violent way of proceeding as having a tendency to undo God's inheritance. Says she, Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? Though he was on the right side in this quarrel, in that he was of David's side, the rightful sovereign of the Lord, and the Lord's anointed, yet he was not influenced by good principles, nor did he act then from right ends in what he did. He minded nothing but his own interest, and to get his will, acted from a very proud, revengeful spirit, and this drove him to very unwarrantable and spiteful actions. So he killed Absalom, which, as the case was, he had no business to do. And so, to satisfy his own envy and revenge, he murdered Amasa in the time of this strife, because he could not bear that Amasa should be above him, and have that place which he had formerly had. So, in cases of strife amongst a people, it is often so that though men are of the right side, yet in the management of things they are like Joab. They justify themselves by their having the right of the cause, but indeed they act mainly from private views, to gratify their own envy and the spirits they have against some particular persons. They manage things in a very unsuitable, fierce and unchristian manner. These therefore are not some of those that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. 2. Not everyone that cries out of and condemns contention in others is one that at such times is peaceable and faithful in Israel. A person at such times may say a great deal about the evil of strife and contention, and what a pernicious tendency it has, and may see wherein others are to blame in stirring up contention, and may cry out of the measures they take, and may inveigh against them for taking such measures, and may, when they get together amongst those of the same party with themselves, insist much in their talk on this. They may with indignation tell over how those of the other side act or stir up contention, and not only with indignation, but with contempt. They may tell how they act, and then break out into a laugh, and make themselves sports with it, and may insist much on the base spirit that others show. I wonder at them, wonder at their folly, and when they see those of the opposite party, they may reprove them vehemently, and charge them with stirring up strife, with a great deal of spirit, and vehement and fierce language. Such as those are not of the number of those that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Though they oppose others for their contention, yet their manner of opposing it is itself contentious. It only increases contentions. They oppose contention in a contentious manner. They that in this manner do oppose contention are like them that blow against the fire. Their pretence is that they would blow it out, but indeed they do nothing but blow it up, and make it burn exceedingly the more fiercely. The way to put out fire is not to oppose fire to fire, but to throw on water. The fierce way some men have of opposing contention in others is like a man setting one fire against another. The effect will be nothing but to make the flames the most exceeding furious. To this purpose is that in Proverbs 26 verse 21, as coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. But they that are peaceable in Israel rather oppose contention with peaceableness and meekness of spirit. A man may show as much spirit in crying out of others ill spirit, and inveighing against it, as any other way. Did the wise woman of Abel, in the case of the two parties in Israel, oppose contention after this fierce manner? No, she took a contrary method. She lived in the midst of them, that were of the contrary side to her, in the city of Abel. But if she had taken such vehement measures, 'tis not probable she would be tolerated amongst them, much less had such influence upon them. How did she oppose contention in Joab? In a wise, meek way. Though he had approved himself a very murderer in this quarrel, the woman of Abel won upon Job's heart and melted him. Job himself, on the contrary, took a contrary course. He opposed contention in others. He condemned the factious spirits that others showed, particularly the faction of Sheba, 21st verse of the context, but did all in a fierce, furious manner. 3. Not every one of them that seem peaceable after they have got their wills, or after they see there is no hopes of it, is so. Many persons will strive and contend as long as they have a gain in their will, in prospect that afterwards will be peaceable. Many after they have got their wills will be very quiet, that before are very fierce and violent, and others after they are conquered, they see there is no hopes of getting their wills. So it was with Joab, though he was so fierce and violent, after he killed Absalom, Amasa, and all that stood in his way. Joab sees himself established in his place of captain of the host. He seems very peaceable and quiet, though exceeding fierce and violent, though exceeding malicious and murderous of spirit. So on the other side, the disaffected Israelites strive, many of them, till they see no hopes. They knew strife under Absalom, and when he was dead, then under Sheba, and when he was dead too, and quite conquered, then, as we read in the context, they returned every man to his tent, verse 22. But they were not of that number that the wise woman was, one that was peaceable and faithful. Second, positively, the character of one that is peaceable and faithful in Israel, in the time of public divisions and parties amongst a visible people, contains in it the following things. 1. He is one that is more influenced by regard to the interest of religion and the best interest of God's people than any private interest concerned in the quarrel. In fact, his reputation may be concerned. He may be one that has been greatly abused by those of the opposite party, but those things don't sit with that weight on his spirit that the interest of religion does. He'd rather lose in his estate, rather unjustly be put under disadvantages and suffer much in his worldly interests, in his just rights. He values the honour of God and honour of religion more than his own honour and reputation. He'd rather suffer abuse from the opposite party, that rather his enemies should get their wills. He prefers the interest of religion more than being delivered from unjust adversaries. From this especially the character of faithfulness belongs to him. He is faithful to God and faithful to the cause of Christ. He adheres to Christ, the true David, the rightful king of the church, though he forsakes his own interest, as the wise woman of Abel was denominated faithful, in that she, in a time of public rebellion, and when all about her forsook their allegiance to David, that rightful sovereign, she cleaved still to him, never went after Absalom, nor Sheba. When others scattered about, she had stood fast to the Lord's anointed. So Christ's faithful disciples are more influenced by regard to his interest than to their own private interest. They are of that spirit that they hate their private interest in comparison of the interest of Christ's kingdom. Luke 14 verse 26. He that cometh to me and hateth not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Such prefer Jerusalem above their chief joy, as the psalmist earnestly professes of himself. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Psalm 137 verse 6. The apostle much blames the Corinthians that they did not show more of this spirit when occasions of contention arose amongst them. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 7. Why do you not rather take wrong? Why do you not rather suffer yourselves to be defrauded? The wise woman was of this spirit. The thing that lay with the greatest weight upon her spirit was mostly the interest of the inheritance of the Lord. This was what she was concerned for, lest that should be swallowed up, as appears by what she says to Joab. Joab was of a contrary spirit. He was concerned for his own ends to serve them, and that made him kill Absalom and Sheba. That made him kill Amasa, for he thought that Amasa would stand in his way. 2. That he don't act from any edge or engagedness of spirit against any of their neighbours. They don't do anything from any old grudge. 'Tis not because they remember what such a man did at such a time, how he then did him an ill turn, how he abused him, how he treated him basely, or how he did things at such a time that were cross to him, that he acts anything. He has not acted from a spirit of revenge. He don't say with himself, now I'll do to him as he had done to me. Now I will be even with him. Now I'll let him know that he shall get nothing by such things as them. Such things are sweet to contentious men. Nothing is sweeter than revenge to them. But this is not the spirit of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. He don't act what he acts from a spirit of envy, because it hurts him that such and such men should prosper, so that they should have so much honour, because it hurts their spirit, that they should have such power and influence. This is not the thing that pushes them on. The peaceable and faithful in Israel won't gratify such a spirit. You don't do things from heat of spirit, or any bitterness rising up against others, or from any appetite that longs to cause others to disappoint and frustrate them. It is not because they long to get their wills of such that oppose them, that they may see it, and so be grieved to see that they have got the victory. Attend these rules, Philippians 2 verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. And Galatians 5 verse 26. Be not desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. His practice is such as is not condemned by that in James 3 verses 13 to 15. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter envy and strife in your heart, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. 3. He that is peaceable and faithful in Israel, in time of distress and division into parties, avoids backbiting, reviling, and evil speaking. At such times there is commonly a great deal of that, when men's spirits are engaged. When they get together, there will be a great deal said against such and such, to set forth how bad they are, to run them down, to make one another have a worse opinion of them there. They will tell of this and that, and then make their reflections, and have their dissents, and will observe how foolish and silly this action was, and what a base spirits that showed, and how intolerable this was. And very commonly there will be a great deal of ridicule. There scarcely ever is a quarrel subsisting amongst a people, but there will be much laughing one at another behind their backs. When those of the same party get together, the time is much filled up with this. But he that is peaceable and faithful in Israel avoids it. For he is one that don't at such a time allow himself in judging and evil surmisings with respect to others. There is commonly a great deal of this, judging one another's hearts, or what others have done, that they don't know that they have done. They are very free in charging others with things only on surmise. Such an one did such a thing. It was he that did it. He was the author of such a story. He was all the cause of such a difficulty. Or they are very free in judging others with respect to the principles or ends that they acted from, that they don't know. They do but guess. One will say any such an one did so, only for such an end, that was all. He pretended to do it for such a good end, but that was not his end, that was the thing he aimed at, and they will be sure to pitch upon an end wicked enough. Those things they do without restraint. They give themselves a vast liberty this way, though they condemn it greatly in those of the opposite party. If they hear any of them have taken such a liberty with respect to them, they are vexed and look upon it very ill. But he that is peaceable and faithful in Israel, he wisely holds his peace. He don't take upon him to judge others, he bows to their own master. He attends these rules of Christianity. Matthew 7 verse 1, judge not. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 5, therefore judge nothing before the time, until the Lord comes, who will both bring to the light the hidden things of darkness, and make manifest the counsels of the hearts. Romans 14 verse 4, Who art thou that judgest another man's servant to his own masters? He avoids the condemnation of that scripture, 1 Timothy 6 verses 4 to 5, whereof cometh envy, strife, railings, evil surmisings, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds. 5. He that is peaceable and faithful in Israel, don't act in the affair in hand in a fierce or violent manner, as his spirit within him is not edged, so his outward behaviour is not violent, but calm and gentle. When he talks with others that are of an opposite judgment, 'tis not with a violent, clamorous air. His speech is with grace, seasoned with salt, as the Apostle says, that he may know how to answer every man. Colossians 4 verse 6. His talk is not with that vehemence to be like wind, to blow up a flame and foment division. But there appears in him those fruits of the Spirit mentioned, Galatians 5:22 to 23. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. He shows that wisdom that is from above, that is peaceable, gentle and meek, and he exercises that charity that suffereth long, and is kind, that envieth not, that vaunteth not itself, that is not puffed up, that does not behave itself unseemingly. He puts away all bitterness, and wrath, and anger, and clamour, and evil speaking, with all malice, agreeable to Ephesians 4 verse 31. 6. He won't at such a time act anything against any of his neighbours in a secret and underhand manner, secretly plotting against anyone, how to disappoint or cross him, bring him down, or overthrow his designs, whispering one with another secretly, flattering as Absalom, and taking such like counsels as he, taking indirect and underhand methods to possess the minds of others, against such and such a man, secretly endeavouring to create jealousies of others, and to fill the minds of others with prejudice against such an one, that it may be before they thought well of, neither doing those things, nor lending a listening ear to them that do them, but rather distrusting of them, and discountenancing them. This way of whispering and plotting and secretly managing for one against another is greatly condemned in the word of God. Proverbs 16 verse 28. A whisperer separateth chief friends. Chapter 6, the 16th verse, etc. These 6 things does the Lord hate. One of the things mentioned is him that soweth discord among brethren. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 20. Lest there be debates, envyings, wraths, strife, backbitings, whisperings. 2. Reasons why persons may well rejoice when they are peaceable and faithful in time of strife and division. Such a peaceableness and faithfulness as has been described shows a true greatness of spirit. Proverbs 16 verse 32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. Those men that are violent, as are great conquerors who subdue cities and nations, are accounted great-souled men, but the wise man tells us that he that rules in spirit is bigger than he. This is a very honourable spirit, Proverbs 20 verse 3. It is an honour for a man to cease from strife. They are little-souled men that are apt to enter into contention and to stir up strife. It is a sign of littleness of soul, easily upon every occasion to be put into heat and ruffle. A peaceable spirit is a divine spirit, a spirit suitable for the children of God, and therefore they are honoured with that name in Scripture, Matthew 5 verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. To be of such a spirit is to be like Jesus Christ, for he was meek and lowly of heart. When he was reviled, he reviled not again. He was like a lamb before those that injured and reviled him. Second, because such persons don't provoke God as others do. Persons in times of strife do greatly provoke, especially a visible people, a people that are favoured with distinguishing privileges. The people of Israel dreadfully provoked God in the time of that strife that there was in Israel. There were great provocations on both sides. Absalom dreadfully provoked God and brought himself to a fearful end, and Sheba likewise brought himself to a fearful end, and the people that were with them. And Joab on the other side contracted that guilt in the time of this contention that at last brought him to a fearful end. The wise man teaches us that contentious men do contract such guilt. Proverbs 29 verse 22. An angry man stirreth up strife, and a furious man aboundeth in transgression. Third, such persons have much to boast peace and quietness in their own minds, both in the time of it and afterwards, while others are put into a ruffle and heat, inward peace is disturbed. Such persons don't quietly enjoy themselves. If there are the prevailings of inward malice and envy that are uneasy principles, they are to the soul as fever to the body. It is both uneasy in the time and also destructive. It consumes the health and strength. Proverbs 14 verse 30. A sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy is rottenness to the bones. Fourth, such persons as are peaceable and faithful in time of strife and division are like to be distinguished from others by a divine blessing. Blessing is pronounced on such persons as one of such a spirit. There is scarcely any spirit or temper that has more blessings promised to it than a meek spirit. Such persons are much more likely to have the presence of God with them than they that intermeddle in strife. The presence of God is promised to such persons, 2 Corinthians 13:11. Live in peace, and the God of love and peace shall be with you. Such persons are much more like to have the comforts of God's Spirit than others. And while others are in heats and feuds, they are often in the enjoyment of that peace that passes all understanding. It is said, Psalm 147 verse 6, that the Lord lifteth up the meek. He delights to lift up and honour such and favour them above others with comfort and joy. So it is said, Psalm 22 verse 26, the meek shall eat and be satisfied. They shall eat and be satisfied and be abundantly comforted, while the souls of others that are contentious feed on the wind and are in a poor, starved condition, for such persons are in the way of no good. I appeal to the experience of all that are now my hearers, whether at such times as when their spirits have been heated with the spirit of opposition and desire of crossing others, or the like, whether their souls have not been destitute, and instead of flourishing in grace and comfort and the light of God's countenance, all have not gone down from him and languished. Such persons be not in the way for grace, nor comfort, nor any other good thing, but only to what is hurtful and prejudicial. Proverbs 17 verse 20, he that hath a froward heart findeth no good, and he that hath a perverse tongue falleth into mischief. On the contrary, they that maintain a meek and peaceable spirit are in the way of light and joy. Isaiah 29 verse 19, the meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord. Yea, they that seek peace are in the way of all manner of blessings. 1 Peter 3 verse 10, but he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips from speaking guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. Fifth, such a spirit is often attended with blessed effects to others. Such whose spirit and practice is peaceable and faithful in the time of strife and division are under abundantly the greatest advantages to do good. They can have the greatest influence on others to do service. Persons will be more inclined to hearken to them. An angry man won't hearken to one that is like himself, but sometimes they will hearken to such a wise person as she whose character we have in the text. What blessed effects was there of her faithfulness and peaceableness in the time of strife and division? What power and weight had her words with the fierce and violent-spirited man Joab? She soon melted him, as it were. And what weight had her words also with the men of her own city, that were of an opposite party, and doubtless very much engaged, in that Sheba, in his greatest strait, chose to trust himself there with them, rather than anywhere else, which he would not have done had not he looked on them as firmly attached to his interest. Yet she went through all the city in her wisdom, and they hearkened to her. And the wisdom of this one peaceable, faithful woman was made the instrument of putting a final end to those dreadful broils and contentions that had so long subsisted through the whole nation. Application. In the improvement of the doctrine, I would only apply myself to one sort of persons, namely those that have been peaceable and faithful amongst us in the time of the strifes and divisions and parties that have lately been amongst us. I doubt not but there are such here present. 'Tis most notorious that there has been much of a spirit of strife seen in this town of late. Contention and a party spirit is the old iniquity of this town. It has been remarkably a contentious town, I suppose, for this 30 year. People have not known how to manage scarce any public business without siding and dividing themselves into parties. Though it be a great disgrace to a town to have any such true of them, yet 'tis too notorious to be denied to this town. When the Spirit of God of late was so remarkably amongst us, this spirit seemed to cease. But as God has withdrawn, this hateful serpent has again put forth his head, and of late, time after time, that old party spirit has appeared again, and particularly this spring. Some persons may be ready to say that they are ready to think that I make too much of things, and I think worse of them than they be. However, though I don't suppose that the town in general have actually been engaged in a malicious, envious, or hot spirit, yet so much is notorious that some hot-spirited, contentious persons, I don't determine who they be, God knows who they are, have industriously stirred up strife, so that such great numbers have been foolishly heated in their spirit, which they have many ways manifested, and so that there has been a manifest open division into two parties, with a great deal of heat in many of them, one against another. And these things are undeniable. He that would hide it must hide the wind, that many men have shown an edge and grudge one towards another, and have had their spirits engaged to cross one another, and however they may have restrained themselves in open and public town meetings, yet there has been a great deal of backbiting. Persons have given themselves a liberty to run out one against another. Much conversation has been spent in it, yea, and laughing one at another. That is when those of the same party have got together, and have been set down and talking about such and such persons of the other party. They, after setting out how they have done, they have broke out into laughter. They possibly might think in the time of it of no harm, but if two parties do so one against another, that is contention, if anything be contention, and a very bad degree of it too. And persons have given themselves a great liberty in judging and surmising things one against another, only from their guesses, things that they did not certainly know, and some have been fierce and vehement, and shown spirit in their way of talking of things one about another. And there has been a great deal of secret contriving and caballing one against another. These things are too evident to be denied. But I don't suppose that all have been guilty of these things in our late divisions. I am sensible there has been a number all along that have not been guilty, at least in no considerable degree. They have not had a hand in contention. There are some, without doubt, that have carried themselves like those that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. They have not had their spirits heated. They have acted from no manner of ill will to any man in these affairs that have been matter of strife. They have kept a calm, cool spirit, and they have refrained from these backbitings and other violent measures that others have taken, and they have heartily lamented the contentions of others. It has been really grievous to them to see such strife amongst us, after such great things God has done for us, and after all the obligations God has laid, and when we are so as a city set on a hill, and after so much warning. I make no question but there are some such, and those I would now apply myself to in the application of this doctrine. First, rejoice in it, and praise God for it, that you have been preserved from such unchristian heats and contentious practices as others have been guilty of. This you have great reason to rejoice in. If you can say it, you may say with humble joy, as the wise woman did, I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You have great reason to praise God for it. This is distinguishing mercy to you that God hasn't left you to such a spirit and such practices as he has others, that you may see what cause you have to praise God for this. Consider particularly 1. God has kept you from having any immediate hand in this dishonour and disgrace to the town that our late divisions will probably be an occasion of. God has of late put great honour upon this town. He has most remarkably honoured us by the great things that he has done for us. The great work that he has lately wrought in this part of the country began here, and was principally seated here. This has given us honour abroad in other places in the eyes of good men that have heard what God has wrought, for they have entertained very honourable thoughts of this town on the account of the peculiar honour God has shown us. They have been ready to say, what people are so great that have God so nigh to them. We have had great honour put upon us on the account by wise, pious, and learned men beyond the seas, who have taken great notice of what has been done, and they account us an happy people, and look upon us as a sort of chosen people above all others, and have very high thoughts of the blessings God has bestowed upon us, as appears by what they say in their letters. But they are, without doubt, expecting to hear of a walk and conversation very distinguishing from other people, as well they may. But the divisions that we have had, in all probability, will turn greatly to their disappointment and our dishonour, and so much the more abundantly, for the very high and great profession we have made. Those things that are taken notice of in us with surprise. There have been many all along that have reproached us for the profession we have made, and have called us a parcel of hypocrites and enthusiasts, and a whimsical, proud, deluded people. But good men to and fro have stood up for us, and have opposed those that reproached us, and have pleaded that it must be a work of God, and that we are certainly a wise and holy Christian people, and have had hard work to withstand the reproach of others, and it may be have borne reproach themselves for standing in our defence. But when such things as these come to be heard of us, it will weaken their hand, and will cover them with both shame and confusion, and in a great measure stop their mouths. It will be an argument into the hands of our adversaries that our friends won't know how to answer, and good men themselves will be surprised and stumbled, and won't know what to think, especially when they consider that 'tis so soon after such a wonderful work of God, which is heard of and wondered all over the country, and taken great notice of by good people. And thus we shall be disgraced and dishonoured, and 'tis well if we don't begin to stink in the nostrils of many, for nothing appears more nauseous amongst men than a very great and high profession joined with wicked unchristian practice, as this, no doubt of it, will be the dishonour that will be the issue of this town, as 'tis said of a person, Ecclesiastes 10 verse 1, as dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savour, so doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honour. But you that have been peaceable and faithful in Israel, though you greatly lament this dishonour we do ourselves, yet may have this to comfort you in this grief, that you have no reason to confess that by your sins you have helped to prompt God to leave. You had no immediate hand in it. Those contentions were not owing to you, and so you haven't had a direct hand in this dishonour to the town. 2. God has kept you, who have been peaceable and faithful in Israel, from having any immediate hand to the great wound that has been given by those contentions to the honour of religion. God has so ordered in his providence that the honour of a vital spiritual religion is put very much into our hands, so that we may kill it or keep it alive. It is a time wherein such love of religion as we profess is very much out of credit, and there has been a great fame of the wonderful appearance of it here far and wide, and 'tis known 'tis of that sort that Arminians and others of the more fashionable sort of principles do oppose and reproach, and the fame has been so great that the eyes of all sorts have been drawn upon us, enemies to vital religion to find faults, friends to vital religion to find wherewith to confute the enemies of it. Friends have hitherto rejoiced and looked upon it that they had a great advantage put into their hands. Not only in this country, but in England, great notice has been taken, and is more and more. I've lately received a new particular account from a letter that has been sent since, which they have wrote over, manifesting their great joy and their design to spread the narrative of it in the world, as much as in them lies. And the servants of God beyond the seas, who are now rejoicing and praising God for us, and expecting still to hear glad tidings of us, probably have no thought entering into their heart that we in the meantime have been contentious. When their mouths have been filled with praises, our mouths have been filled with backbitings. No town in America is so like a city set on a hill by God, and to whom he has in so great a degree betrusted the honour of religion. God has committed the honour of his own great name by putting honour upon us, and by the blessings bestowed on us. It has also been very much taken notice of by pious and learned persons in other parts of the land, how wonderfully preserved from contention, how greatly affected with it we are. They speak how God makes Northampton a place of wonders, and it is manifest by what they say of themselves, how they expect we should be affected by it. But to hear, after all, that we have been contentious, what a wound will this be to the honour of this sort of religion that we profess? No doubt but it will be an exceeding wound. It will add an ill savour to the report that has been made of us, and it is well if it don't make good men that have confidently boasted of us and gloried in us ashamed of us. The Apostle warned the Corinthians against it, 2 Corinthians 9 verses 2-4. For I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal hath provoked very many. Yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this behalf, that, as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply if they of Macedonia come with me and find you unprepared, we, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. I have no expectation of any other, but that the credit of the work that has been wrought amongst us will sink very much to our shame. I have heard already that persons abroad have heard the news with surprise. Let those that have been peaceable and faithful in our Israel therefore rejoice that they have been kept from having any immediate hand in such a great wound to religion. Rejoice and praise God that you have had no hand in that dishonour to religion, that a wise, considerate person, and that had a right sense of things, would not have had any hand of it, not for all our inner commons, nor all the rest of the land in the whole town. 3. Bless God that you have had no immediate hand in that wound that has been given by our divisions to religion itself amongst us. 'Tis what every one sees and acknowledges, that religion of late has exceedingly declined, and that we are grown very dull. And there is no doubt but one principal cause. That has been our contentions and strifes, one after another, that we have had in the town. There is scarce anything that gives such mortal stabs to religion among a people as contention. Where contention is alive, there religion will be dead, and there will be nothing flourishing that is good, but it tends to make everything to revive that is evil. James 3 verse 16. Where there is envy and strife, there is confusion and every evil work. Religion lies bleeding amongst us. Christ, who has lately been so wonderfully gracious to us, bestowing salvation as the fruit of his precious blood, which he shed for us, as it were bleeding amongst us, as if he had not suffered enough already. His wounds have been, as it were, opened afresh by the selfishness and sinister ends, and high spirits and envy and anger of contentious persons. 'Tis a sorrowful sight. O bless God, you that have been peaceable and faithful in Israel, that you have had no immediate hand in it. 4th, bless God that you have not contracted such guilt and given such words to your own souls, as other persons have done. There has been contention amongst us, none will deny, and therefore some have had a hand in it. Yea, some have been the fomenters of it. They have given great wounds to the honour of the town, which they should regard more than precious ointment, and grand wounds to the honour of religion, and to religion itself, but they have given to none of them greater wounds than to their own souls. they have contracted great guilt in the sight of God. If we consider things aright, you would not have contracted the guilt that such persons have contracted for thousands of pounds. Some probably may be ready to say that I make too much of things. Though there has been some contention, yet 'tis not worth the while to make so much of it, and preach so much about it, but it must be for want of confidence. If anything, it must be for want of sense of the unspeakable obligations we are under. I have that sense of the things that God has done for us, and the circumstances of the town now with regard to the credit of religion, and the many warnings and obligations we have had, that I do think that the contentions that we had amongst us of late, though some may call them small, are 10 times so much to be lamented as any contention that has been in the town, and bring 10 times the guilt upon the town. We have laid an offence and stumbling block by such things before the world. It would be well for some persons if they did more consider what Christ says, Matthew 18 verse 7, "Woe to the world because of offences. It must needs be that offences come, but woe to that man by whom the offence cometh." Christ therefore denounces woe to the man by whom an offence comes to but one single Christian. If any offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. But those that have been the contentious persons amongst us, it is to be feared have laid a stumbling block before good people, far and near. What guilt then must they needs have brought on their own souls, especially considering what abundant warnings they have lately had. And it is well if some of them haven't come with their hearts full of the leaven of a cloyed ill spirit to the Lord's Supper, either secretly gratified with having got their wills, pleased to think how they have got their wills of others, and crossed them, or grieved and vexed that they could not get their wills of others, and so grudging one to another. This spirit remained entire in them, and remains still, though it may be now they don't say so much as before. Such have eaten and drank condemnation to himself. Let those that have been kept from dishonour and have been peaceable bless God that they have been kept free from thus dreadfully wounding their souls, and bringing such guilt upon them. 'Tis probable that some may say that I have been instigated by others thus to preach at this time. I have observed to my surprise that I have scarce ever, since I have been in the town in my preaching, reproved any public disorders or iniquities. But I have heard that this has been surmised, that I have been instigated by others, though it has every time been altogether without ground. Such surmises seem to proceed from the same jealous and evil surmising spirit that prevails amongst us, and the same spirit that the Jews showed when they said to Jeremiah, "Baruch the son of Neriah setteth thee on." Jeremiah 43 verse 3. I never, as I remember, have yet, nor do I now, deliver anything from any instigation of any person whatsoever. But I proceed second to give some words of advice to those that are peaceable amongst us, how to conduct themselves in time of contention in the town, for time to come. As to those persons that are of a contentious spirit, and that have had a hand in our former and later contentions, 'tis to be feared they will be contentious still. There is no prospect from anything that appears in men, or any circumstances that appear at present, but that sort will be still from time to time contentious in the town, for all anything that is said to persuade to the contrary. When men's outward interest in their pride comes to be touched, I have no reason to think from anything that at present appears, but they will be contend and create strife and division in the town. I confess that I have had great hopes in times past that the people of the town would be persuaded, and that the consideration of the great things that God has done for them would have such an impression upon them as would be an effectual restraint, but soon saw that it had not so great an effect as I expected. Then I flattered myself that when the town came to know what great notice was taken of it abroad by others, that would have effect. And when I set home the consideration of these things, I must confess I thought we were not so bad, but that it would have a lasting effect upon the town in general. but still I found myself disappointed. People proved apt still, in every little difference in judgment, to be contentious. Then came this surprising providence, and so wonderful a preservation from strife, that was so exceeding remarkable and affecting, and so many families were immediately concerned in that providence, that I thought surely Providence had put such an advantage into my hands, that what I said in public, as applying that providence and warning them from it, would be effectual, not imagining that so soon after it I found myself disappointed. I don't know, but I've trusted too much in men, and put too much consideration in the goodness and piety of the town. But what has been might be enough to prevent it for the future. I have seen all external means and all strength of men fail as to any effectual preventing this. It is very like there may be some men in this town that there has scarcely been a public strife in the town this 20 years, or never since they came to act in public affairs, but their spirits have been on edge, and their mouths open in evil speaking, in fierce and clamorous talk, and backbitings and evil surmisings, though it may be they condemn quarrelling and cry out of others' quarrelling. As to such persons I have now no hope, but they will quarrel still, unless God takes their hearts in hand and makes them much better men than ever yet they have been. The wise man tells us how little hope there is of such persons. Proverbs 29 verse 20. Seest thou a man that is hasty in his words? There is more hope of a fool than of him. I have no reason to expect that the town will be in circumstances wherein it will have more powerful obligations and external inducements to avoid contention than it is now and has been of late, especially this spring, since so wonderful a providence has put advantage into my hands, and such warnings on that occasion given from the pulpit. I am not able to set more powerful arguments to persuade them, more than I have done to prevent and avoid contention. I have sought out acceptable words, and those which I thought most likely to take effect. I have used my utmost skill, and I have seen the ineffectualness of all. There are many men in the world that when they are opposed and crossed will contend, let what will become of the honour and interests of religion, yea, though heaven itself should go to rack. Nero, the Roman emperor, wished that all the people of Rome had one neck, that he might cut it off at one blow. So there is a sort of man that, if the honour of religion has, as it were, but one neck, and their contending would cut it off at one blow, yet they would contend, rather than not get their wills. And 'tis well if there be none amongst us too much akin to them, if not some of them. The honour of religion in this land never had more one neck than now, and that be trusted with us, our practice shows how careful we are of it. Therefore I would direct myself to them that I can advise and counsel with more pleasure and more hope, namely those that are peaceable and faithful in our Israel. I would pray you to attend to a few words of advice, how to conduct yourselves in case of contention for the future, in 3 things. 1. In such cases, endeavour to restrain contentious persons, while others are stirring up strife. Such persons as are peaceable had need to be diligent to restrain and prevent them. When others are kindling fires in the town, be you diligent to quench them. There is as much need of being earnest and diligent in such cases as to quench an house when it has got on fire, and to take heed that you don't do it in a fierce way, or by opposing fire to fire, but in a meek and mild way. If others are violent, you had so much the more need to be meek and gentle. A soft answer turns away wrath, and a soft tongue breaks the bone. Proverbs 25 verse 15, as we have an instance in the wise woman. If you follow this advice, you won't only be peaceable, but peacemakers, and will be entitled to the blessing. 2. Avoid the company of contentious persons. If they won't be restrained, avoid them. Don't sit in those companies where they are carrying on about others. Don't listen to such talk. Show a discountenance of it, and if any come to you whispering you in the ear, and endeavouring to possess you with an ill opinion of such and such a man, don't hearken to him, Or if others laugh at their neighbour's faults, don't laugh with them. Don't associate yourselves in times of contention with contentious persons. If you do, it will be very difficult for you to avoid being infected and partaking of their spirit, and falling in with their talk, and also being provoked in an unsuitable manner to oppose them. Proverbs 22 verses 24 to 25. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways, and get a snare to thy soul. Third, pray for such persons as will be contentious. They stand in great need of your prayers, for they are in a sad way. They need pity and prayers. Their prayers for themselves, if they do pray, be not like to do them much good. For God don't love to hear the prayers of contentious persons. Therefore we are directed when we pray to lift up pure hands without wrath. 1 Timothy 2 verse 8. If you are truly of that character, your prayers will be much more likely to be heard. For God hears the prayers of the meek and humble. While others therefore are contending, be you praying and earnestly seeking to God for them, and for the ark of God that is like in such quarrels to be carried captive. And pray that the inheritance of the Lord may not be swallowed up.